Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay this morning. Let me check my sound. I always check your sound. I've got sent a very nice email explaining that some of the issue with my sound may not necessarily be me. It may be OBS itself. So thank you very much. And I'm trying to update it based on what the articles were saying. But nevertheless, let's do the news. I had a bunch of administrative stuff that I had to do yesterday, lending to the show. There were a lot of people on the show said they wanted to contact. So like Ackerman, I needed to get back in contact with Galloway, John Kiriakou, essentially trying to get guests to come onto the show for the next few weeks. That being said, I have a lot of shows that I need to get through today. So I'm probably not going to hold these shows. I'm not going to tarry. At least not on all of them. There's some that I definitely want to linger on. So there are going to be 2 or 3 shows throughout today that I'm going to linger on and bring in the audience. And I may even have the audience call in there to that degree of insane. Or to that degree of interesting, let's say it that way. But the next few are going to be relatively quick. So I'm going to be in and out. Just giving a heads up. Also, look guys, I want to thank everyone who contributes to the site. Whether it's through Patreon, whether it's through Super Chat, whether it's sending articles, whether it's liking, sharing the videos, you guys are immense help. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. I can't say it enough. It's weird. Sometimes people say, hey, thank you for doing this. And I'm looking at it the other way around like, no, thank you, because I wouldn't be able to do this without your assistance and without you guys helping making the show. Let's see. I'm getting weird stuff on my video feed. Just making sure everybody can see it. Good. Yeah, good. So yeah, guys, I just wanted to say thank you. I don't necessarily do it each and every video because I always feel weird about the money stuff. But it's necessary. It's appreciated. Thank you very much. Thing I want to talk about today, and I have a ton of stories. But this one, I'm going to start on this one because the story had already been queued up on Sunday. This would give Orwell a run for his money. Like Orwell with a jetpack, Orwell on steroids, or some other kind of chemical that ups the level of Orwellianness associated with Orwell. Orwell would say, wow, that's pretty badass. And he would have to come up with another name for it. He would have to rack his brain for something that supersedes what he considered to be Orwellian in 1984. The United States, as you know, has instigated itself into a conflict in Syria. When Donald Trump took office, all of us, a lot of us, plenty of us, seeing as he was conciliatory towards Russia, hoped that he would be less hawkish on the Syrian front than his opponent. His opponent was talking about a missile defense shield, which is political language for essentially we need to instigate ourselves further into the civil war. Mind you, we're already instigating a civil war, but we need to instigate ourselves further into a civil war. We need to get U.S. troops further ensconced into that conflict, despite the fact that Russia and Iran are already in that conflict. A lot of us ask the question on the left and the right, if you shoot down a Russian jet, what do you think is going to take place? I consider this to some degree a threat to the world itself. For all of Trump's faults, that seemed to be one of those things that's a red line. You're talking about something that's A, instigating us into a war, and B, potentially a nuclear conflict. Now, that being said, Donald Trump takes office, and on strikes, he still remains in Syria. At one point, says he's going to pull the troops out, and then at another point, the military is saying they're going to stay there indefinitely. Anytime there's a chemical strike, whether or not we can identify the fact where a chemical strike has taken place or not, it's kind of besides the point. We are funding the White Helmets. They've also started getting funding from other groups that are affiliated with the West. And I don't necessarily know. Look, I don't believe there was a chemical strike until I see evidence of a chemical strike. Mattis himself said we're still looking for evidence. And the one in 2017, same thing. Trump fires off a missile, have no evidence. They're still looking for evidence that the Syrian government did it. They don't know. We've had foreign policy led in the sense of people not knowing the reality on the ground, just going by a particular narrative and propagating that narrative. Here's the truth of the matter, and I don't say this for the people who are who are in the government part. I say this for people like me, because for all intents and purposes, regardless of whatever they're telling you, the public itself, meaning the media, because the media should be giving the story, and the media should be explaining the story in a similar way that I'm explaining it, if they're taking the disposition of most of the American public, which is, we're sick of these wars. If you disagree with me on a host of issues, fair enough. But on this particular issue, if your disposition is, I'm sick of these wars, then there is a particular perspective that you would take on that front. Perspectives are not necessarily, how grounded are those perspectives in reality to which we find ourselves. And if your disposition is, I'm sick of war, we need to get out of these conflicts, we need to stop these wars, well, do you take the mainstream media's way of going about looking at this stuff? Here's the thing. The United States has instigated itself into a conflict with this idea that it was supposed to take out ISIS. Fair enough. That was the goal. That was the game plan. We're getting to the point 90% or more of the terrorists in that part of the globe have been eradicated. I mean, at least from the standpoint of Syria. The Syrian government has liberated one area after the next. But the United States remains. Russia, Iran, and Syria. Between those two, Russia and Iran are invited by the Syrian government. The United States is not. And the United States has remained. Syria is trying to get the rest of its area, essentially the rest of its land. The United States has taken a part of that land, has sat there, and is now protecting the terrorists. Literally sending out threats like this. Like this. The United States warned Syria of firm measures for ceasefire violations. What that means is the United States, Syria, Russia had a ceasefire of, we're not going to fight each other. We're not going to get into affairs that's going to cause a conflict. The problem with this is the terrorists are fundamentally almost, for all intents and purposes, almost gone, at least from the other areas. And they are using this idea of a ceasefire that was not necessarily representative of the United States. I'm saying this poorly. The terrorists in those parts are fundamentally gone. You have an area or a group of terrorists that are hiding in areas protected by the United States. Well, this, of course, is going to be, you can't have this. I mean, ultimately, the United States is in Syria, and while in Syria, is warning Syria about taking territory back that belongs to Syria, while simultaneously protecting the terrorists that ran into those areas. This is amazing. This is amazing. You would think that would be a big deal. The United States protects terrorists. In one case, it's already clear that the weapons that these guys got, meaning Al-Qaeda and ISIS, had come from the United States in large part. I've shown article after article, one from an investigative report by Fox News, of all things, where they're literally talking to the guy who was a CIA interactor, and that's not the right word, or go-between, that said, I gave the weapons over to ISIS. I was terrified. You have the other guy, part of the Obama administration, talking to The Intercept, says, yes, these weapons got into the hands of ISIS. The Independent, an article, comes out, weapons from Saudi Arabia and the United States greatly enhance ISIS military effectiveness. We're not making the situation better. That's kind of the point I'm getting at here. And now, we are literally protecting the terrorists. You must understand, part of the larger goal was to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad was hanging on a thread. Here's the catch, or here's the question. In the same way we got rid of Gaddafi, what took place in Libya after Gaddafi left? They were literally selling Africans, selling slaves in Libya, one of the richest countries in the Middle East, selling slaves. Now, in this particular case, you have Bashar al-Assad, who's clinging to power by the skin of his teeth. Russia comes in to prop the government up. Iran comes in to prop the government up. And ultimately, they're welcomed. They were welcomed. It would be like if we welcome another country in order to some kind of political agreement. We're not. We're invaders. Again, we're invaders. What are we using from the standpoint of the Constitution to make this case that we need to be in Syria? We're not under threat. There are no barbarians at our gates. We're breaking the law. In doing this, we're breaking our own laws. We're breaking international laws because we are literally in another country and we're warding off that country from occupying land in their own country. That's amazing. Think of, for the moment, Mexico taking Florida and telling the United States, if you try to send troops in Florida, we will attack. Think of Russia doing it. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what you're talking about. We've stolen land in another country, and we're threatening that country. If you come here to get rid of the terrorists, we will attack you. What takes place after Bashar al-Assad? What takes place after Bashar al-Assad? And if that looks like Libya, is that really something that you want to visit on the Syrian people? What I would suggest is that you listen to the people who were liberated from under those terrorists' rule. When Tulsi Gabbard comes back and say, why are we funding terrorists? These guys are rapists, killers, hand choppers. Why are we funding these guys? And ultimately, it was geopolitical influence of trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad under this guise of, well, I mean, we're just trying to get rid of ISIS. Well, they fundamentally gotten rid of ISIS. It is under the control of the Syrian government, the Russian government, and Iranian government. Why are we there? And this is really what you want to use the United States military to do. Essentially occupy foreign territory that A, doesn't belong to us, and breaks international and our own national laws. Are you not sick of these wars? And do you understand the potential implications if something happens where we've already killed Russians, but they've downplayed that because they didn't necessarily want to deal with the geopolitical consequences if that became a big story. But imagine a large story of us shooting down a Russian jet. Imagine for the moment Russia retaliating against us and killing a bunch of Americans. What happens? How does that escalate? And certainly you can see that taking place. And when you look at the people who are responsible, just remember, we are illegally occupying somebody else's land. And we are trying to warn them off their own land as we protect the terrorists in that country. Let's do a quick rundown of the story. I'm not going to keep this long. The United States warned Syria of firm measures for ceasefire violations. The United States warned Syria on Friday it would take firm and appropriate measures in response to ceasefire violations, saying it was concerned about reports of an impending military operation in a de-escalation zone in the country's southwest. Here's the thing. The United States has unilaterally called that a de-escalation zone, meaning the United States itself has said this is a de-escalation zone and everybody else needs to adhere to the fact that this is a de-escalation zone. That's not an agreement at all. You're literally in somebody else's country saying that the people who live in that country can't take land back from terrorists in their own country. I'm making a point to you that look at what we're doing. This is all I'm getting at. Look at what we're doing and look at who we're helping. That's all I'm saying. Let's keep going. Washington also cautioned Syrian President Bashar al-Assad against broadening the conflict in his own country. As a guarantor of this de-escalation area with Russia, with Jordan, the United States will take firm and appropriate measures in response to Assad violations, State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said in a statement on Friday. A war monitor, the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, reported on Wednesday that the Syrian government forces, fresh from their victory this week against Islamic State pocket in South Damascus, were moving into southern parts of Deira. The United States warning comes weeks after similar attacks on de-escalation zone in northeastern Syria held by the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Force. U.S. ground and air forces repelled the more than 4-hour attack, killing perhaps as many 300 pro-Assad militia members, many of them Russian mercenaries. They are trying to take their land back, and we are helping the terrorists. And by the way, killing Russians in the process. Backed by Russian warplanes, ground forces from Iran and allied militia, including Lebanon's Hezbollah, have helped Assad drive rebels from Syria's biggest cities, putting him in an unassailable military position. They have captured all remaining insurgent areas near Damascus in recent weeks, including densely populated areas of eastern Ghouta, as well as enclaves in east central Syria. The government is now in its strongest position since in the early months of the war in 2011, though still has a long ways from achieving Assad's aim of reasserting sway over all of Syria. Anti-Assad rebels still control two large contiguous areas of the territory in the northwest and southwest. Kurdish and allied Arab militia backed by the United States hold a quarter of the Syrian east of the Euphrates. The government's gains have brought it to the point where new militia campaigns putting it at risk in conflict with foreign powers. But why? The reason it puts it at risk with foreign powers is because foreign powers is occupying their land, protecting terrorists. I can't make this point any finer. That is literally what is taking place here. And the idea that we, standing on somebody else's soil, is telling them that you can't reoccupy an area that belongs to you is laughable. It's completely laughable. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to put the articles at the bottom that I reference. Not going to keep this long because I have a bunch of other videos to show. But thank you guys for showing up, and I will see you guys in like 10 minutes because I have a slew of videos that I already have in my head that I wanted to do. Thank you guys. Oh, let me make sure. Okay. Thanks, guys. See you shortly.